Hey, church family, thanks for joining us for today's Daily Connection videos. We are talking about how we can be confident in the resurrection of Christ, and specifically today looking at the results of the resurrection of Christ. And that's so important for us to understand that there are results because of the resurrection of Christ, things that directly impact those of us who believe. If you believe, directly impacts you. And so Brother Brent started us yesterday in Romans chapter 6, and then we're going to take a moment today looking at verses 4 or 5 of Romans chapter 6. Let's go ahead and jump in here. It says, "Therefore, we were buried with him by baptism into death, in order that just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, we too may walk in newness of life. For if we have been united with him in the likeness of his death, we will certainly also be in the likeness of his resurrection." So you notice here as he's talking about, previously he's talking about how Jesus died. He died in order to defeat sin. He died in order to defeat death. And as believers, we join him in that death. Ours is, obviously, we have baptism, which is a symbol of our dying with Christ. And then oftentimes we say, buried with Christ in baptism, raised to walk in newness of life. It's a representation of the change that exists within us. And when that change exists, we are pushing away the old and inviting the new. And that old is sin. And that's why Paul is using this phrase that we are dying to the self. It's a picture of exactly what happened with Christ. And it's so important that we understand what happened with Christ and the implications it has for us. If Jesus went to the cross and died, and just like everyone else stayed in the grave, there would be no power in the phrasing that we're talking about. There would be no power that would exist over sin. But Jesus lived a perfect life without sin, and his life ended having never sinned. And he proved that sin could be defeated. Now here's the reality. Can you and I defeat sin? No. Has any other human ever defeated sin? Absolutely not. Jesus is the only one to defeat sin. And that's why his life and death is so important, because when he died, he proved that sin could be beaten, but it can only be beaten by him. And then he was raised to new life, showing that he could defeat death itself. You and I, as Christians, everything that we believe is wrapped up in the death and resurrection of Christ. Him defeating sin, him dying, and him coming back to life. We do the same thing spiritually, right? As we surrender our lives to Christ, we die to the old self. The old us is completely gone, and it's buried with Christ in death, and we are raised to new life, a new life that's lived for Christ, and a new life that has power, that has meaning because of what Christ did. It is so important that we understand the importance of the death and resurrection of Christ, because that is the very foundation of what we believe as Christians. So a couple of questions that I want us to look at. First, why is it important to know that Jesus really was raised from the dead? And of course, because that is the foundation of our Christian belief, that Jesus lived a perfect life, died, and was raised from the dead. And of course, that truth has implications for our life. If we are raised to a new life out of sin, into pursuing Christ, then that should have other people should be able to see that in us. That new life should be obvious to others. And that's the next question I want to hit us with is, how can we live out this reality every day? How can you every day live out the reality that you have died to sin if you're a believer, and you've been raised to walk in a new life along with Christ? I hope that you'll take some time to sit down, maybe make a list of those things that you can do on a daily basis, not for the sake of just to do things, but for the sake of bringing glory to the Lord, so that others would know the great work of Christ that's happened in your life. I hope that you'll take time to make that list, and not just make that list, but to act on those things. Church family, as you do that, I want you to know that we love you and we're praying for you.